I tend to be a fatalist, so I'll start with the bad news. We are experiencing a crisis of accountability. As in, someone or a lot of people do something wrong and seem to get away with it. Or maybe they're caught, but the punishment, if there is one, does not fit the crime. I was going to launch into examples of people who embezzled money and bullied employees, even pastors and political leaders who abuse power and brag about getting away with it. But there are so many stories that I realized I don't need to tell you. We've all heard them. And we want to see wrongdoers face consequences for their actions. Because it's not fair, it's not right. When people can break the social contract, or even the law, and it doesn't seem to matter, what then? Without a functional system of accountability, how can we have trust in our institutions and communities? This is what I call the crisis of accountability. Hi, my name is Anne, and I'm an Enneagram 1. That means I was born with a sense of moral indignation. But why am I here talking about this crisis to you? My career focuses on building consensus across differences, on resolving conflict and repairing harm. Part of that repair centers on accountability. To maintain trust in each other, we must be willing to make amends when we each inevitably do wrong. But wait, I hear you thinking, isn't that the role of the criminal justice system? Our criminal justice system is broken and unjust. Even when it works, this system hands out punishment, and punishment does not demand accountability. What do I mean? You can be punished without actually making amends. You might commit a crime, be found guilty, be sent to prison, without ever admitting you made a mistake or apologizing to your victims. Accountability is different. It is a value we must hold, a value that's not necessarily baked into the American criminal justice system. Simply, accountability is an obligation or willingness to accept responsibility for one's actions. You'll note the Merriam-Webster example, public officials lack accountability. Even the dictionary acknowledges we have a crisis. But wait, I hear y'all thinking again, what about getting canceled? Isn't that being held accountable? Right, welcome to cancel culture. On the surface, canceling somebody, as in publicly calling out their missteps, might seem to demand accountability, as the person may be forced to offer some apology and suffer loss of a job or fans or wealth. Canceling is public shaming, but shame does not motivate people to make authentic amends. Cancel culture is not actually justice, just more punishment, which is ultimately damaging for all of us. So, why is our culture focused on punishment rather than accountability? For millennia, humans organized in groups with belief structures that held members accountable. You were expected to listen to elders or community leaders and make amends when your actions harmed the group. As religion evolved, we became accountable not just to the gods and the humans who represent them, but to God, capital G, a supreme being doling out justice. At its best, religion can also model forgiveness and grace and liberation from suffering. Whether Judaism, Islam, Hinduism, indigenous ceremonies, all of these practices provide a moral framework to hold people to account. As our culture has become more secular, more individual and isolated, we're losing adherence to these wisdom traditions, the religions and philosophies that provide shared moral codes. Now, there are definitely problems with religious institutions, but that's another talk. One side effect of people leaving church and temple and the mosque is that it feels like we're on our own, not accountable to God or anyone. This sums up the crisis. How do we fix this? First, although I did receive excellent training as a religious studies major at Austin College, and I am a person of faith, I'm not suggesting religion is solely the answer, nor am I blaming this crisis on secularism. Instead, we need to radically re-examine our culture, which may include a recreation of our wisdom traditions. the communal practices that allow humans to coexist in relationship, being held accountable while working toward a common good. There is one widespread program that calls for making amends, the 12 Steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. These days, making amends can be a radical act, but of course, we are not all in recovery. Fortunately, there is a process that demands accountability for everyone, a process called restorative justice. We need a restorative culture shift to curb this crisis, reconnect to each other, and rebuild our public trust. What is restorative justice? Simply, restorative justice is a philosophy that prioritizes relationships. Whether we like it or not, as a society, we are all in relationship with one another. Restorative justice is rooted in Indigenous peacemaking practices and draws from pacifist traditions like the Anabaptists and Quakers. Before we had governments running courts and prisons, communities had to work through how to repair harm when someone hurt others. In the contemporary restorative justice model, if a person causes harm, they are invited in to meet with the affected community members. Sometimes this can mean bringing people together for facilitated conversations to find consensus on how to repair the harm and provide restitution. Other times, this can mean classes on empathy, community service, writing an apology letter, or finding other ways to repair what was broken. When you hold someone accountable, by making them listen to how their actions impacted others, you create an opportunity for them to grow. This is especially impactful with youth. Kids' brains are not fully developed, and teenagers are programmed to rebel. But if you consistently hold them accountable, they will grow into more responsible humans. This works for adults too. We all deserve the chance to correct our mistakes. As commonly practiced, restorative justice can be either a complement or an alternative to our criminal justice system. My organization, Consensus Council, runs a restorative justice program as a diversion or alternative for juvenile court across North Dakota. We're due north of here, next to Canada. We also provide services for victims of all ages, and we provide training for staff and residents at our state penitentiary. There is so much potential to expand restorative services to every community. I'll share a quick story. A woman, I'll call her Connie, went on retreat at a Catholic convent in small-town North Dakota, population 921. Connie parked her car and hung out with the nuns for a week, something I also like to do. But when she got ready to leave, she discovered her car covered in dents and the windshield smashed. In this prairie town, it didn't take long to figure out that a group of middle school boys had thrown rocks at her vehicle, causing $3,000 in damage. Now, typically, these youth would be cited by police, sent before a judge, and be forced to pay a fine. Then they would have a criminal record and wouldn't have met Connie at all. Instead, these boys were referred to the restorative justice program. After preparation by a facilitator, the boys and their parents met with Connie for a conversation. Connie told them how she wasn't able to get home that day and how expensive it was to get her car repaired when money was already tight. The boys apologized and arranged to work off their debt to cover the cost. These youth could have ended up in the system, but instead they learned that damaging property also hurts people. Connie may have started out upset, but she understood kids make mistakes, and she was provided an opportunity to forgive. Restorative justice is a humanizing experience for everyone. Accountability is not just some bonus outcome. It is necessary for us to exist in relationship. This is all well and good if you run a nonprofit with facilitators in North Dakota. But I promise to offer solutions for our larger accountability crisis. How do we do this? First, we need to collectively reclaim our values. Values are named at the start of every restorative conversation. We must prioritize accountability, integrity, and treating everyone with dignity. When we publicly state accountability as our value, then we can be held to account, and no one will be surprised when we hold others accountable. Second, look to the young. Start with restorative programming in schools, which benefits adults, teachers, staff, and parents as much as the kids. Find out if restorative justice is an option in your state's juvenile system. There is often political will to give kids second chances. We must raise our youth, starting now, in a restorative culture. Third, look to the whys. Seek out the elders and mentors in your life who adhere to something greater than themselves. Consult them when conflict arises. Ask people you respect about what guides them and why. Consider, if you feel a nudge, spiritual direction from a trusted source. Next, we can advocate for restorative services. If your schools or courts don't have restorative options, educate your leaders and request them. Did you know that in parts of Canada, the government provides mediators to help resolve family and community disputes as a public service? What if we adopt this practice across the US? Then anyone could seek a restorative process before involving the police or calling a lawyer. Finally, we can behave as if we are all in recovery. Apologize for your mistakes. Own the consequences of your actions. Avoid the impulse to shame others, especially online. Find an accountability partner. Together, you can influence the groups you are a part of to apply restorative practices. There are experts all over the world who can help. And if you can't find one, call me. Easy, right? No, this is not easy, but it's necessary. And what's more, it is possible. That's the secret here. This work has changed me from a fatalist into a pragmatic optimist, because this solution is practical and proven. I'll close with a final story. About 15 years ago, there was a 21-year-old I'll call Tony who lived in a North Dakota college town. Tony liked science fiction and taking photos with old cameras. He also liked giving back. One day, Tony and a group of friends walked the Relay for Life to fight cancer. On the way home, they were in a car crash. The other driver, I'll call him Mike, ran a stop sign and then sped up when a cop tried to pull him over. It turns out Mike was intoxicated. Mike hit Tony's vehicle, and Tony and one of his friends were killed. You can imagine how devastating this was for their families and the whole community. Mike, who was only 24, was prosecuted and sent to prison for 20 years. Meanwhile, Tony's family was left with unbelievable hurt. Tony had two sisters, Sarah and Maria, who were teenagers at the time of the crash. As years passed, they struggled to heal. Even though Mike had been punished, that didn't make them feel better about their loss. As young adults, the sisters reached out to victim services at the North Dakota Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, which put them in touch with the Restorative Justice Program. Harm of this gravity, like loss of life, can never be fully repaired, but you can foster a healing process. In this case, the sisters spoke with my colleague, Joel Fries, and decided they wanted to meet with Mike. Mike agreed. He wanted to apologize and to show Tony's family the steps he was taking to change. Through a facilitated process, the sisters and Mike met and heard each other's stories. Sarah and Maria told Mike about Tony, about the kind of brother he was, what he loved, and about the community vigil after the crash. Mike apologized and expressed his sorrow. He talked about his own kids and what he wanted for them. The sisters were able to hold Mike accountable after years of prolonged grief. By the end of the process, Maria told Mike she was ready to offer forgiveness, not so much for his benefit, but for her own. Afterwards, she said, "It's definitely a weight off my heart." So I ask you, what weight are we all carrying? Not only from the harms that happen to us and our own mistakes, but from the lack of accountability in our culture. How are we all hurt when punishment and public shame stand in place of real justice? We need true accountability to rebuild public trust, to repair our own hearts, to live in safe communities where people feel heard and belong. This is not the soft route. It is the hardest work imaginable. Is accountability and reforming our culture even possible? My answer is yes, unequivocally, through restorative justice. Thank you.